Hi everyone. So I'll be your host today, Jean-Marc Couffin, for the ones that followed the two previous webinars. You probably know me by now. I'm a French architect, trained architect in France and in the US as well. I'm a senior BIM specialist at BIM One. And if you want to find me somewhere on the internet, you can find me via LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So a quick intro about BIM One, the company I'm working for. It has a sister company that is BIMtrack. You might know it. BIM One helped at the very beginning to develop BIMtrack. That's how we are related. Our mission statement, we try to help organizations increase productivity and efficiency in their construction projects through digitalization and technologies and innovations as well. We provide some customized solutions, strategy, project, implementation as well, and some training. And this for all the people around the construction environment. As some of our partnership, we are pretty active actually in the industry, and we have some partners at with CAN-BIM, Building Smart as well, and the Grid and the École Technique de Polytechnique de Montréal, as well as Group BIM Quebec. And those are some of the best practitioners in the industry, and we tend to work with them to improve what we are producing in the BIM environment. So the main topic of the series is understanding the geo-referencing. That's a matter that we discussed in the two previous webinars. The first one happened at the end of March. The second one in April. The first one was about defining some common ground for geo-referencing and some common language as well. The second one, we went quickly through how to coordinate coordinates with the master file, basically, and we talked a bit about the point clouds origin as well and the Revit coordinates. And today we'll put this knowledge into practice a bit more and dissect the process of setting up a geo-referencing in the rules of the arts. So we'll go through this today by discussing the creation of the ideal master file and its geo-referencing. Also, we'll be linking all the discipline files and geo-referencing them from the master file. And then we'll do some manipulation in each discipline file to control and try to control what's happening in the master file from there. If you have any question or comment, please indicate them in the conversation window and we'll just get through it. So let's get started by creating our master file. So when do you want to create this master file? Well, actually the earlier the better. But if it happens later, you can still decide to make it happen later if the discipline files are linked origin to origin. That would be your best practice for now, while you wait for the real thing to happen. Who's going to manage it? Well, basically there's two options usually. You could ask architecture because that's the discipline responsible for the position of the building on the site mostly, and that could also be proposed to be managed by structure that is responsible for the position of the columns or the grid lines in the project. In any case, that's the BIM manager responsibility. And you don't want to have several people to touch that file because it's your only source of truth. So you want it to be monitored pretty tightly by one person. One important aspect of having a master file is to pick the right version for Revit, because geo-referencing is a much easier process to process and to understand in the recent versions of Revit, but you need to be careful what you're getting into because there are some limitation. If you start in Revit 2019, you wouldn't see the internal origin, and at the time it is still possible to clip or unclip the project base point. If you go for Revit 2020 and Revit 2020.2, you could from there see the internal origin within Revit, within your views under the site category. But at the time you could see it actually a little bit too much, because it was visible by default in every view when you did the switch. With the latest version, that has been fixed by now. The project base point is not clippable or unclippable anymore, and the extra option that you have, you're able to move it to its original position on the internal origin. In Revit 2021, you have an extra option that is pretty cool, actually. It helps you to reset the shared coordinates. Before that, we used a middleware, a middle file that was not geo-reference at all, and you could grab its shared coordinates that were the 0, 0. And that would do the trick. But with this option, that's much easier to deal with. And if you go with Revit 2022, I would suggest that you wait until the release of Revit 2022.1. That is usually the first release after the main release. The first build release is going to be issued in June. So you'd rather wait for that instead of jumping right into Revit 2022, because it usually fixes most of the biggest bugs in the software. One of the, in any case, if you pick any of these versions, one very important question is to ask if the plugins that you're using and the team that the team is using are compatible with any of these versions. Because if you pick the latest version of Revit, it doesn't mean that you will have access right away to all your favorite plugins. So for the basics of the creation of the master file, it's basically a shared file. So you need to use under the collaborate tab. You would pick the collaborate option and pick the way you want to share it, and then after that, what you will need to do is to close that file, save it as a central file, and then reopen it. Be careful with the naming, be clear, make it identifiable, and document it in the BIM execution plan or the BIM management plan, depending on your situation. And you should clearly indicate that this file on its starting page, who's going to be responsible for this file, this specific file. For the basics, you need to fill in the project info and then specify its location, its address for the project. That always helps for the simulation, for the sun and shadow simulations. After that, you might want to control everything in your file, so make some specific views like a side plane view. So be careful with the view range, the display of every point, including the project base point and the survey point, and also the internal origin. And also be careful with the discipline. You can see on the view range, the view range here, what you will need to be careful is to set your offset much higher than the level of your survey point, because if you don't put it like 100 meters from your basic level, that would be at sea at the beginning, you might want to check on that. You also want to make some specific plan view, probably. So some views for axis, for grids and levels that are copy monitors, maybe a view for the surveyor plan, or a view for linking new models, and also some elevations and section. Another set of controls that you can set up is to use some schedule in Revit, a schedule for the levels, with all that information, especially the building story. Just be aware that don't use levels for everything. Levels is supposed to be finished floor levels mostly, that you would find in the master file, and make sure that you show also the linked levels as well in that schedule. So you see all the options for the setup of that control schedule. And the same goes for the grids. So it's basically the same. The quantity of information is rather less. So you would control the naming, the scope box that it's assigned to, and also the types, and depending on where the grids are located in which file. Another control sheet, if you're using a sheet as your starting page, which is kind of common right now, you know that in a sheet you can put obviously some title blocks, and in the title blocks you can include a revision schedule, which is kind of useful actually, because you can use it as a register on your start page to input all the modification that you're going to be doing in your master file. So that's a good place and a good way to work out the history of your file. Then you will have to be to use the workset option and set that up properly. So have a workset for the site that contains the property line, for example, and possibly the site, if not modeled in a separate file. You would also have a grids and levels workset to be able to control them. So that means that whenever somebody is going to insert your master file in their own file, they don't want to see the grid lines from the master file all the time. Eventually, they might want to have a more granular control over it. So the workset is going to help you with that easily. And you would also need to provide one workset per Revit link instance to enable the control over them. Whenever you load the file, the master file, you might not want to load all the linked file at once so that it goes faster while opening it. One little trick here, that's what we call the protection of safety design option in the master file. It's a suggested practice, and it's pretty effective actually. It comes from the technical advantage, the technical asset that you have while you're using Revit, that an element that is placed in a design option is not selectable by default. So it's pretty unique. If you have a unique design option comprising of only one option in the set, you will not be able to select or move all the elements that are comprised in that design option whenever you don't untick the little cross that says select only elements in the current options. So please also note that the levels cannot be part, obviously, of the design option. So that's something that is not applicable for levels. Another thing that we need to set up in our master file would be the phases and the phase filters. So pay attention to the language of Revit while you start all your models. This is important because for the correspondence or the mapping of phase and phase filters between the link files, you want to have a consistent display of the graphics, the graphic elements. And by default, the phase and phase filter take the language of Revit whenever you start a new file, unless you're starting it with a specific template. In the example here, you could see that if I'm selecting an architectural model, for example, that is linked into my master file, my master file only has two phases, the existing and new construction, and the link file seems to have very different names for the phases. So the automatic mapping of the phase, the correspondence of the phases is not automatic at all. And then you would have to make it work in a very manual process, which is okay if you have like 2-3 files. I mean, it's not such a big deal, but if you have more than this, it's going to be a pain to work through all the list of the mapping, the mapping for the phases. So it's easier to work that out from the very beginning of the project and set that up among the team. Now we'll start putting the grids and levels in the master file, and you would have the project grid lines, the basic one, the A1, A, and go on from there. And you could also use some reference grid lines Like in that example, the north, south, and east, west on the chosen geodetic marker according to the orientation of the geographic north for future reference. The idea is to have the internal origin and the survey point on the master geodetic marker and to have reference axes on this point. But it doesn't matter if things move later and the marker is no longer on that specific point, but the idea is to be able to understand the history of the master file. Also, you would have to set up the project levels. So the floor levels and not all the secondary, like I said earlier, not all the secondary levels that are not relevant for disciplines other than the one that is in charge of the master file. The grids and levels, the grids and levels, if modified, will be modified in the master file. So the changes will be easier to pass on to the entire project team through their control, through monitoring. So from there, we'll start. We did a lot of setup. Now we'll do the actual geo-referencing by linking the center to center, the surveyor plan. And if it's linked in a view, you don't have to worry about the work sets. Otherwise, you need to be careful to set properly your work set beforehand. That's easier onto the ZL underscore DWJ, for example. And then you need to, before that, you need to be careful with the insertion options. So do not correct the lines that are slightly off axis. That's a bad practice. You need to specify the unites as well, and also be careful to where you place, at what level you're placing your file. So from there, you unpin the CAD, and then you move the CAD and positioning it, make match the geodetic marker in the CAD file and the one that you want, and the place where you want to put it in your master file, which would be on the internal origin and the survey point right now. And you want to unpin the survey point, otherwise it will remain hooked to the origin of Earth. So, and therefore you would end up far from the other elements of the models after you do your geo-referencing. So don't remember to unclip it. That's a better practice. From there, you would want to acquire the surveyor plan coordinates. So you select your DWJ from the surveyor, and then you acquire its coordinates. That's a way of doing it. There's another way to do it through the UI, but that's a simple way to understand that you're manipulating the surveyor plan and asking it to give you your shared coordinate system from where it's placed on. So be careful to rename also the shared site after that, or while doing it. A good way to rename it would be to use the identification, the identifier of the geodetic marker and the date of the geo-referencing for future reference. And then again, just pin the CAD and slip it in the protection design option, if not insert it in view only. From there, what you need to do now, because you see that the project base point and the survey point, they are at the same level, so you need to work that out in elevation as well. So you unclip the survey point, if not done beforehand, and it will, so that it doesn't stay on the internal origin, and we can just use the coordinates of the geodetic marker as the origin of the point cloud doing that. So if you move the levels and project base point vertically accordingly, and in our case, you can see that it was the survey point and the project base point were like 300 millimeters higher than the reference marker. And we will need to activate the selection of the elements of the protection design option so that we can move them and unlock them as well as they were pinned before. And from that, your master file is basically geo-referenced. Just a quick note, if your project is a campus or a site with several buildings, the master file will be geo-referenced from a site file to allow simpler modification without having to move the grid lines in the master file. One quick trick as well, and also some extra information. The picture I'm showing you is a pretty nice plugin that allows you to synchronize your scope boxes between links, which is pretty useful. So it helps you synchronize the shape of it, the location, and also the name, and tells you whenever it's not matching. So in your master file, you want to have your scope boxes, and you want also to assign the grids and levels to scope boxes to get a regular display of the grids and levels extensions. And you might want also to draw the property line and put all the fixed elements in the project in your master file, because it's supposed to be your single source of truth. So the master file should contain all the datum. The next step is to linking the discipline files and their geo-referencing from the master file. So linking discipline files, it's fairly easy from now on. You need to link them origin to internal origin to have them on the proper location at first. And then from there, you need to move them so that you position them properly in all 3 dimensions. That means that once it's inserted, you see it's on the internal origin here, you just move it in plan and then align it with the proper location of your axis set up in your master file. Then you do your rotation if needed to align them. They're supposed to be 90 degrees here, so I'm not dealing too much with the grid alignment. And then you need to move it also in elevation. You see, we see again our 300 millimeters difference between the levels that we had beforehand. And from there, you can select your file and then rename the instance so that everything is tidy, and then publish the shared coordinates. So one very important note, besides all the housekeeping that I'm doing here, be careful that here it looks like it's the coordinates are shared, but at this stage they are not yet, because in order to get the shared coordinates populated in your linked file, you need to save the master file. That's one very, very important thing to understand. When you're recording the location, it's happening only when you're synchronizing the master file. So you would get 1 window per file. So here that's my architectural file, and it's asking me explicitly to save the current location back to the link, so back to my architectural file. What happens in the background is that Revit will write the information of the new shared location in the project info of the discipline file. So if someone were to take ownership by changing the project information in that file just before what you're doing, without releasing this work set, you will not be able to modify the shared location. So it's therefore better to carry out this manipulation off hours, or to take ownership of the project information work set temporarily in the discipline file beforehand. From there, you would want to unshare the site so that you don't get the pop-up to save the location afterwards first. That's one of the reasons. And also that helps to prevent unwanted movement of the shared coordinate system. It's like having both suspenders and a belt. It's easy to return to the shared coordinates later if one of the model has been moved by accident. And this is a good practice because it ensures that the shared coordinates are not modified at all. And then we'll do some housekeeping. So to reduce the risk of accidental modification of shared coordinates, You would want to name all the instances of your linked files, place them on a dedicated work set, both the instance and the type. It's easier for you after that to select them and to understand what you have when you select something. You would also need to use a protection design option, except for the levels, so that you don't have any unwanted snap or movement. And also in the end to pin and lock in place the link file so that you have no unwanted movement as well. From there it looks like we're almost done, but we're not done quite yet. One important feature in Revit is the copy monitor or copy monitoring, so that you can monitor the changes. So when you're using the copy monitor, once you select your link and then you grab all your grids and levels, you can grab these levels and make sure that you get to monitor them during the life of the project by using these options. So you will be notified of any modification to this element when opening the master file afterwards. It's the only way, except if you're using Dynamo to validate if such element of a category is checked. The only way to see that is to select it. So if you select your grids or your levels, you will see that small icon here. And also you will see in the modification tab, the stop monitoring option. So that's pretty much it actually for the master file manipulation. We're done with these changes in the master file, and it is geo-referenced, and our discipline models are geo-referenced too. I did only one for the example. Obviously, you would have to do it for every discipline after that. And now, to make sure that everything is going to be fine, we have a few things left to do in each discipline file. So some housekeeping first. So validation of the site use, specification of the location in its address. So that's something that we did also in the master file. Just understand that if you're making your master file before everything else, and then you could use that master file as a base to start your other disciplines project files eventually. That would be easier so that you don't have to do all this housekeeping. It would be done already. You would want to validate the shared coordinates thanks to the master file. So in order to do that, you need to link the master file at the shared location and repositioning the survey point to check its coordinates as well. And it's always better to have unclipped the survey point, like I said before proceeding to geo-referencing, so that it stays in a location that is within view. You will need to validate the geographic north and the project north, turn off the site sharing after that, and then pin, design option, work set, and then I guess you get the drill. And then you would want to add the other discipline because you're not working by yourself. So you link them after that, shared at the shared location. And then you do your housekeeping again. So assign the proper work set, name the instances, put the link in the design options, the protection design option, and then pin the links and turn off the site sharing. So what's left again would be in that example in the architectural file. You would want to copy monitor or just monitor the grids and levels of the master file, so that whenever the person in charge of the master file is going to change something in it, a level or a grid position or name, you'll be able to get a warning whenever you open your file. So copy monitoring is a very important step. And then you do also your housekeeping. So put your grids and levels in the right work set, and again use the design option as a protection, except for the levels, and then pin everything. That's the end of the webinar for today. So we went through the good practices of creation of a master file, and then we geo-reference it properly. And we also geo-reference models on the coordinates and location of the master file. that concludes our webinar series, and thank you for attending. Please do let us know if you're interested in some more advanced topics, such as moving the model towards the internal origin, for example, or doing a double rotation of Project North. We might treat this subject whenever people show interest. That's it for now, and if you have any more questions or comments, please send them to info@bimone.com, and we'll try to reply in a timely manner. So thanks a lot for attending, and have a good one.